folks, just getting ready. Let me know if the television is too loud. The fiance is home watching TV and our house is all in one room. Mud Spinner, that's a cool name. Welcome. I'm gonna wash my hands and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hi there. Hi, Mom. So, I've been asked for this, how are ya? I've been asked for this vegan granola recipe for a while, and I've been meaning to put it up, hey Cecilia, meaning to put it up on my website, and yeah, it's really fun and totally adaptable and really easy and super quick. So we're not going to be on the scope for too long. I'm going to assemble it and stick it in the oven to bake. My oven's already preheating at 350, and I'll talk a little bit about different ingredients you can use, different spices and things you can use to flavor. And if you guys have questions, just shoot them out. I'll try to look up as much as possible to check on your questions. So, just to go over the ingredients, I've got a couple of things that are going in a pot on the stove. Yes, I will absolutely put it up on my blog a little bit later in the next couple of days or so. Hopefully with this video replay, I'm saving it to my device as we scope. So, yay! Yeah, so you won't have to write anything down. I'm not a really good measurer, so when I put recipes up, it's somewhat approximations. I do the best I can, but typically the recipes that won't get messed up if things are just a little bit askew. So the first thing I do, there's only one element that needs to be prepared while you're mixing your dry ingredients together, and that's the liquid. So I use coconut oil, and then I use maple syrup, and I use a little bit of vanilla extract, some cinnamon, and brown rice syrup. So if you're not familiar with brown rice syrup, it's a sweetener, and you can find it in typically any health food store, Whole Foods, and I've even found it in some regular grocery stores in my area like Stop and Shop and stuff like that in the health food section. So it's very thick, it's sort of gloppy, a lot like molasses. So let's talk about different things you can put into the liquefied consistency, and that is molasses if you want to have it, give it a little bit more of a gingerbread flavor. I've also used barley malt syrup, which is another thick sweetener instead of the brown rice syrup, and certainly you don't have to use coconut oil, although it doesn't taste like coconut oil. You can use any type of oil that works for you, except I wouldn't use olive oil. I would stick with like a nut-based oil or just a regular canola or vegetable-based oil. So I've got a little pot ready for these ingredients. I'm going to set my bowl aside. I'm going to work up here so hopefully you can see, and load these ingredients. My kitchen is super tiny, so if you've been on cooking scopes with me before, you know this already. Great bowl, thank you. Yes, I made that bowl. And it is my only large mixing bowl in this tiny kitchen. My favorite brand of coconut oil, I honestly don't have a favorite. I'm not super loyal. I buy what's cheapest, especially for recipes like this. Hey, from Australia, awesome. So this is just a Crisco brand, not that I want to support Crisco, but this was what was cheap the last time I bought it. It can be rather expensive. I do try to look for organic at the very least. So I'm going to estimate that it's probably a quarter of a cup or so of the whatever your oil is going to be. So a quarter of a cup of the coconut oil. The nice thing about coconut oil is it at room temperature it's hard, right? So if you're not familiar with it, at room temperature it's almost like a Crisco. It definitely comes out of the container hard, and it liquefies rather quickly when you heat it up. So in the summertime you look in your cupboard and this stuff is liquid. In the wintertime it's hard. Kind of cool. And then I go for my maple syrup. Certainly if you don't like maple syrup, you could substitute for honey if you didn't care about it being vegan or not, or any other sweetener. And so I do probably about a half a cup of maple syrup. And then I'm gonna add my brown rice syrup. And like I said, if you've not worked with this stuff before, this is rather gloppy as well. I'll try to pour it so you can see how it comes out. It's very, very thick. And I'm probably going for 1/3 of a cup or so of the brown rice syrup. Sorry for this last minute scope. I wasn't planning on doing a scope today, but we ran out of granola. And then a good couple teaspoons. Oh, thanks. Yeah, you bought it for me. That's why you love it. That's my mom. A good couple teaspoons of vanilla. In fact, I'm almost out, so I'll just go ahead and add the rest. Stick that in our recycling bin. I try to put ingredients away as I use them so that I know that I've used them already. And my kitchen ends up being a little bit more clean when I'm done cooking. So, and then I add the cinnamon right to this liquid ingredient list. So, you know, this is my favorite kind of cinnamon. It's called, oops, there goes my knife, cinnamon ground Vietnamese. Ground Vietnamese cinnamon. And of course I've got brown rice syrup. Now all over the floor. Live cooking demo here with the vegan potter making a mess. Making a mess in her kitchen. Fortunately, it landed on my sock. So, I'm gonna add this Vietnamese cinnamon, big bottle of vanilla, and then refill the small. Yeah, that's a good idea. And I like the better vanillas, the ones from like Madagascar, the really good brands, but I just had the cheapo store-bought brand today. So a good couple of teaspoons of the cinnamon. The difference between this cinnamon and this Vietnamese cinnamon and other regular cinnamons is that this is much more flavorful. It has a sweet flavor to it, so it's really, really delicious. If you've never had it, go find some Vietnamese cinnamon. So good couple tablespoons. We're cinnamon freaks in our household, so we go through it pretty quick. So I'm going to put this coconut oil, maple syrup, brown rice syrup, cinnamon on the stove. Hey, Corey. I'm going to turn my stove on low. Rather, my burner on low. And we'll get to the dry stuff. So I've got salt, slivered almonds, organic walnuts, pepitas, or pumpkin seeds is what these are, sunflower seeds, and gluten-free oats, whole oats. Right, so that's the basis for my dry. Now you can certainly add dried fruit, but I don't bake the dried fruit into the granola. I add it afterwards because otherwise it tends to just bake the juiciness right out of the dried fruit and it becomes just more dry. It's not as good. So I usually, lentils, interesting, okay. Yeah, I mean, you could add quinoa, you could add chia seeds, you could add any other kind of nuts. I've usually done it with pecans. First cook the lentils and then dry in the oven. Cool, yeah, so dried chickpeas work the same way, which are delicious. We use this for breakfast and we like to use almond milk over the top of it. So this has been my basic go-to stock ingredient list for at least a couple of weeks. So there's probably a half a cup or so of these pumpkin seeds I'm going to add. There's probably a cup of slivered almonds here. And again, when I'm cooking, I do it all by eye. I always use the same bowl. I know how filled the bowl should look and the ratio of oats to everything else. There's probably a good, too much. I won't put all of these sunflower seeds, sunflower seeds in. Maybe a half a cup of sunflower seeds. And then I've got my walnuts. Gotta go. Okay, cool. My walnuts I'm going to crush up a little because I'm not really a big fan of huge pieces of nuts in granola, especially when I'm eating it for breakfast. I'm just going to open the bag up here and use the end of a mason jar. Who doesn't like to play with their food a little bit? And then I'll pour in the ones that have broken up a little bit. So I'm probably adding like a cup or so of broken up walnuts. So I used to make this granola a lot years ago, and I stopped making it. I go through phases of making, and then I get sick of things because I just keep making it, and I get sick of eating it. Walnuts, got a couple of big pieces here. I'm just going to finish breaking those up. Wash your hands and get interactive with your food, especially with walnuts. Walnuts are a really, really good source of a lot of different vitamins, as well as protein, good omegas. And I just read an article, I'm trying to remember where I read it, that was talking about walnuts specifically being, them finding more and more, doing more and more research about that particular type of nut. I'm going to do just a little light sprinkling of salt, like a sweetened salt. So this is probably like a half a teaspoon of salt in this whole batch. And then I'm going to add my oats. I usually buy things in bulk, it's cheaper. This doesn't have to be a super costly recipe, but I tend to buy organic, so I make it more expensive than it has to be. And I'm probably adding a good 3 to 4 cups of oats. Three to 4 cups. Go back with this fabulous spatula, wooden spatula that my dad made for me. I have about 4 of them in my kitchen. My dad's a woodworker, and it's my favorite, absolute favorite cooking tool. I try to use these whenever I can. I'm just giving this a good mix. And I'll give you a visual of this so that you can see sort of the ratio of nuts to granola. Take a screenshot of that baby. Wait till I mix in the liquid. And I'm going to check on my liquid. Looks like we're good and melted. Like I said, I just put that on low and I just let it melt down. You don't really have to stir it until you're ready to put it in your mixture. And I've also preheated the oven to 350, so that's been preheating for a while, so this will be ready to go right into the oven. I've also tried this with nut butters mixed right into this liquid. I tried it once with just a creamy organic peanut butter, and it came out good, except the granola does not get as, what's the word? It stays a little bit more on the dry side when you add a nut butter in. It didn't get quite as glossy and crispy as I like it to get, so that was the one downfall of the nut butter. So you want to give this a good stir to get everything incorporated so there's no dry bits, no dry oats. And this makes a big batch. It usually lasts us about a week or so because we eat it, Matthew and I eat it for breakfast every day. And sometimes for a late night snack when we want something but we don't want a big meal. So you can see that this is a really glossy, it's slightly sticky, but it's pretty loose. So it's not going to be super sticky when you go to put it on your baking pan. So I use a big baking sheet like this. I normally line this with parchment paper. I'm out of parchment paper. Hey Nicole, how are ya? So I've basically just done a quick coat of coconut oil on this pan just so that this mixture doesn't stick to it. But normally I do use parchment paper. I advise it. It makes it easier to get the granola off the pan later as well. And then I just scoop it all into the baking pan, spread it evenly. I have a tiny little oven. Otherwise I might use 2 baking sheets and just alternate them, the level of them halfway through the baking time. my nice big mixing bowl. So I'm going to spread this out in a nice even layer. And I typically will bake this for a good 25 minutes or so, and then I take it out of the oven and I stir it and flip it over. What happens is the edges of the pan will cook first, usually, in my oven anyway, and so you want to flip those in so that you don't get burnt areas. But it will get a golden brown, and so it's up to you how long how long you actually want to cook it for. But I usually do 25 minutes on the one side, and then I take it out of the oven, I flip things over, and another 25 or to maybe even 30 minutes on the other side. But you want to check. And I cook it at 350. So keep checking. If you are adding dried fruit, you can add the dried fruit, or dried coconut is another nice thing to add, but I typically will add that in like the last 10 minutes of cooking time or so, and just, you can, sprinkle it over the top and then mix it in, or you can just wait until your granola is out of the oven completely and cooled down, and you don't have to bake the dried fruit or the coconut in at all. So here's what's going in the oven. Nice even layer. It looks really glossy. It still looks glossy when you take it out when it's actually finished, and it will still appear a little bit moist. Yeah, it's really good. It'll still appear a little bit moist. Don't worry about that. It starts to dry out as it cools off, and that's when it becomes more crunchy. If you leave it on the baking sheet after you take it out of the oven, rather than just scooping it into a bowl, and you leave it packed on the baking sheet, sometimes you'll get more areas that chunk together. So if you like bigger globs of granola rather than just loose oats, you can leave it on the sheet for a while. So I'm going to stick that in the oven, and that about does it. I will, you can see the post on my Instagram page if that's how you saw that I was broadcasting today of the finished product, but I'll definitely put this broadcast up on my next blog post so you can review the video as well as the written recipe. Are there any questions before I sign off for the day? Thanks for tuning in. Oh. No, I'm nobody's hero. I'm just a regular person. You should do some scopes. I think I saw you on I know I've seen you before on scopes. And I think you remember you saying you're too shy to scope. Yeah, you can watch the replay back, but it will be up on my blog at theveganpotter.com. So if you missed the replay, don't worry. I'm going to keep it evergreen up on my blog. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Have a great afternoon. Yeah, oats like whole oats, so Quaker whole oats or any whole oats that you get at the health food store in the bulk section. I just happened to buy the gluten-free ones the past time that I went. So any type of oats, you just don't want to get the quick oats. You need the whole oats.
You could also use
no
Holland
problem.
Oats.
You can. Oh, my fiance says you can also use Holland Oats. So there you go. So I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Check me out at theveganpotter.com.